still in the book of Exodus as we sort of work on from what we built on last week. And we might go back to the first slide in that reading. So this week it was really interesting because I thought, there'll actually be a lot of commentary and research on this text, but it was actually difficult to find something that sort of went beyond the obvious of the fashioning the gold into the golden calf, which I actually found really interesting. But there were two things here that really spoke out to me, and they're sort of the things that I want to sort of focus on today, and we'll sort of get to the golden calf at the end. But the thing that really stood out to me was, I think we're on the next page. These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And of course, when they're talking about these are your gods, they're talking about the image of the calf that was cast. And the next part, if we go down to the next one, the Lord said to Moses, "Go down at once. Your people whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt have acted perversely. They've been quick to turn aside from the way that I commanded them. They have created the golden calf." And you might think, well, they're interesting things to stand out. But I guess the first thing I'd point back, if we go back to the previous slide where it has, "These are your gods, our Israel," is the way it's written, right? In these are your gods. They're not, these are our gods. So who's speaking? Who's saying this? It's like, these are your gods, O Israel. Not these are our gods. And you would think if that was coming from the Israelite people as they sort of appeal to Moses, well, they're Israelites, and they'd say, well, these are our gods. But they choose different wording there. And that I just found peculiar. I sort of had to get my head around who's actually speaking. And I couldn't find too much on it, but in I sort of found some work done by a rabbi in the Jewish tradition, and I guess we'd refer to them as experts on the Torah, and they spoke about this in quite some detail. And the idea that this rabbi was talking about sort of looked at, it wasn't just the Israelites who fled Egypt. There was some, and I'll use the words that this rabbi used, there was some Egyptian riffraff that sort of came along with them, right? And the idea is Moses sort of was kind of okay with this because if you want to come and be with God, well then that's your call, that's your decision. And the idea here that this rabbi was sort of outlining is that it was these riffraff that were sort of there with the people of Israelites, and they were working against what Moses and God and the Israelites were trying to do. And so when Moses failed to return, okay, so they got the days wrong when they calculated the 40 days, because in the verses previous, we've sort of received the 10 commandments, and then Moses declares to the people he's going to go up to the top of the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And the rabbi sort of spoke to about that the people calculated from when Moses left, there would be 40 days from that day, but Moses meant 40 full days, 40 full nights. So it was a day late. So when they expected Moses to return, and he didn't, that was the opportunity to sort of sneak in some different gods. And so you have this concept and this idea of, well, Moses hasn't returned. We don't know what to do with him. Let us go to Aaron and let us create gods for us to follow, right? The people needed to be led. They didn't want to be without a shepherd. And so I just thought that was interesting because, you know, these are your gods, O Israel, not these are our gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And there's even a declaration there that, you know, it's this golden calf that brought us out of the land of Egypt. So there's a little bit of corruption there. What is interesting is why Aaron goes along with it. I'm not quite 100% sure there, but I think if I put myself in the shoes of Aaron, I've got about 150,000 people and they're asking for something. Maybe Aaron took the path of least resistance. And the other thing that I want to just keep in our minds is what they cast the golden calf out of, where they got all the gold, the jewelry that they had on them at their disposal, and that's what they used to create this golden calf. And I think that's interesting for us today because it's a precious metal that's highly treasured, that's highly valued. It's a good of the world, right? So we can sort of view that through the context that they turn to the goods of the world or to treasures of the earth to create and cast the golden calf, which they then turn to worship. So let's just keep that idea in our minds, and then we're going to go to the next slide when God is speaking to Moses. Now, last week when we looked at the 10 Commandments, we had God proclaiming in that first verse, I am the Lord your God. I was the one who delivered you out of Egypt and freed you from slavery. And here we have God saying to Moses, go down at once. Your people, who you brought up out of the land of Egypt, have acted perversely and they've been quick to turn away from me. So I found that really interesting as well. And those two ideas that, you know, there was some Egyptian riffraff that was, you know, there to sort of unsettle the cart, and this idea of God turning to Moses and going, your people who you delivered, we need to sort of see this as a bit of a temptation from God to Moses. So where the Israelites at the bottom of the mountain were turning away from God and creating this golden calf, and Moses is up on top of the mountain spending time with God, God is putting a test to Moses. And the test is, are you going to claim for yourself? Are you going to elevate yourself to my status? And are you going to claim for yourself the work that I done? And when God says, go down at once, your people whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt have acted perversely. They have been quick to turn aside from the way that I commanded them. So there's the challenge, direct from God to Moses. Are you going to be like the Israelites at the bottom of the mountain? And how does Moses respond? Well, let's deal with this first. I have seen this people, how stiff-necked they are, you know, is one of God's response before, you know, Moses comes back to God. And that was another thing I went, I need to figure out what that meant. And what that means in the Hebrew is they're an obstinate people and they're really difficult to lead. And that was oh wow. Because if you've ever raised children, they're an obstinate people. They're difficult to lead. If you've ever had to lead a team on a project at work, right, they're an obstinate people. They're difficult to lead. So I just think that was a really interesting line in there that sort of sums up where we are as humanity. We're an obstinate people and we're difficult to lead. And God says to Moses, as part of this temptation, I'm going to consume these people, I'm going to destroy them, and I'm going to start again with you. So this is all part of that test. What are you going to do, Moses? Are you going to turn from me like the Israelites did? And are you going to claim for yourself the work that God has done? or are you going to remain faithful to me? Then we have Moses' response, which was brilliant. Moses implored the Lord his God and said, "O Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people?" So God says to Moses, "These are your people." And Moses turns it straight back around and says, "No, God, these are your people. Why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt?" God said to Moses, "You brought them out of the land of Egypt." Moses turns it straight back to God and says, "No, God, I didn't do that work. You did that work." And he goes on, "With great power and with a mighty hand." And he argues, why should the Egyptians say, "It was with evil intent that he brought them out to kill them in the mountains and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your first wrath, change your mind, and do not bring disaster on your people." So well done, Moses, right? He stands up to that test. He speaks truth back to authority in that, okay? And he doesn't lean into the temptation that is put in front of him. So that's something for us all. And through doing that, what does he do? He saves his brother and the Israelite people from the wrath of God, which is an interesting idea. If we remain faithful to God and speak truthfully to authority, we save the people we love and the people around us. That's a very powerful message. That's something we need to all take home today. And one of the things that always strikes me about Exodus, I think, and the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, and those really early stories in the Bible, is how much truth they speak about the modern world. And this really struck out to me today, and there's a story in particular that struck out to me today. With the corruption and the sin in the world that we spoke about at the start, you know, how quickly we are to turn away from God when we can't see him or he's not where we expect him. Okay, we quickly turn away from God. And there was a story earlier in the week about Qantas. And I don't know if you know this, but just a couple of months ago, in August, Qantas announced an annual profit of $2.47 billion, okay, which was a record profit for the company, right? Slaps on the back, great work, okay, well done Qantas, $2.47 billion. But there was a story earlier in the week when the war broke out in Israel and particularly at Gaza, that a plane ticket that normally would cost $500 out of Israel to safety, Qantas was selling those tickets for close to $6,000, $5,000 and something. Okay, so there was a need and a demand had increased, and Qantas had capitalised on that demand. And look, I don't want this to be about what Qantas should have done. I think it'd be pretty easy if we all put ourselves in the seat of the CEO at Qantas and we had $2.5 billion sitting in the bank, that we'd make a pretty quick decision. Well, I'm going to take my A380s over to Israel, and if you can show me an Australian passport, I'm going to get you out of there. I think we can all sort of sit comfortably in that. And I wonder, is that us seeing the speck of dust in our neighbour's eye and not seeing the log in our own? And that's sort of where I wanted to sit with this today. We started the service with what are our concerns for the world. And, you know, we looked at the power, the greed, authority, money, racism, entitlement. When we have these people of Israel struggling for God or not able to see God, they quickly turn to the treasures of the world and create their own gods out of that. What a description of the modern world that we live in. Whether it be technology, whether it be this culture of social media, where, people make a living off building this image of themselves that's not reality, this online persona of themselves, and that becomes everything they dedicate their life to, upholding and keeping this persona. We might call that a golden calf. And I wanted to sort of look at what was happening, that story with Qantas, because it sort of just reflected in me, well, an opportunity presented itself, and the first reaction was to see what we could extract for ourselves out of it. And I don't want to stand in front of you here and necessarily say that's a terrible thing. Because even all those things that we spoke about, money, power, authority, like we all know we need money to live. All those things in of themselves, they're not bad things. Carl Jung has this idea. He was a famous psychologist. Carl Jung has this idea that regardless of whether you're a person of faith, we all worship something. And he sort of stipulated that we arrange our world within a hierarchy. Something always has to be at the top. Something has to be the most important thing to us, regardless of what that is. That might be money. That might be the promotion. That might be getting that $1.5 million home on top of the hill with the city views. Whatever it is, we all regard something as the most important thing that we strive towards. And in that end, we all worship something. And I think what this story really needs to tell us is we really need to have a grip on ourselves and what sits at the top of our hierarchy. We have to have a grip on it. Because if we don't, we can easily find ourselves gathering up the gold, gathering up the treasures of this world that we value the most, and creating our own golden calf. But if we look to Moses, and if we look to how Moses reacts to that temptation, where he says, no, I'm not going to step into that. I'm going to give the credit to God where the credit to God exists. I'm not going to fall for the trick. I'm going to remain faithful to the God that loves me, to the God that betrothed himself to me. Of all this story and all the things we could talk about, Moses' reaction and response to God is what we need to remember. He doesn't buy into it. He directs the right praise to God. He directs the right acknowledgement of what's actually happened back to God. Even when God's dangling that temptation right in front of him. And what's the reward if we can achieve that? What's the reward if we can do that? We save our community. We keep our community in good order. And God will be faithful to us. I didn't want this to be really confronting. I wanted us to find in Moses' response the faith and the love and the grace of God, because it's there in front of us for all. And God did turn from his fierce wrath. When Moses there says, change your mind and do not bring disaster onto your people, I don't think God changed his mind. I think God was happy to see the decisions and the actions that Moses did. That was enough. That was enough for our loving, gracious God to pull his people back in. The power of standing up, the power of choosing God over the treasures of the world. We have no idea the impact that has in our lives. We have no idea the impact that can have on our community. Mainly it's unseen. We won't know what would have happened if we made the other decision. But we can see, and we do know, that when we turn to God with the right praise, the world is a better place. We can hope, with how we started our prayers for others today, we can hope that the leaders of our world can turn away from the treasures of the world and turn to God. We can hope, as we sit in the aftermath of the referendum yesterday, that we can all turn our own communities and our own hearts towards the will and the wisdom and the love of God, and will be directed and guided on the path forward out of where we are. We just have to have faith, and we just have to trust. And I think we need to learn to do that over and over and over again in our lives. It's actually one of the great things about Christianity, this book, Faith in God, is that it doesn't matter how far along the spiritual journey you come, you always find yourself at the same crossroads. Am I going to remain faithful? Am I going to fully put my trust and commitment in God? Or am I going to trust in myself? It's a continual letting go and renewal of faith and commitment to God. It's why coming to worship on Sunday is so important. It's why we feel spiritually filled after coming here. It's also why some Sunday mornings it's a bit of a chore. We have to choose to do it. We have to choose to recommit. Even when it's 30 degrees, minimal wind, and the surf at Mooloolaba is pumping. Even then, we need to recommit, learn to trust, and come back to God. And we know, because I can see on your faces, how great that is. What a great choice that is. How much that fills us with hope and gratitude and thankfulness and love. How it makes it easier to make that choice again. So let's be Moses and not give in to the temptations that are around us, but continue to put our faith and our trust in the Lord our God, the gracious, the loving Lord our Father, who serves us so loyally and so faithfully and so well. Let's finish with a prayer. Lord, we're so grateful for the opportunity to be in your presence today. We're thankful for the people around us in our lives. And we're thankful for how you work within each and every one of our lives in such small, minute details. We're grateful and thankful, Lord, that we all experience your love differently. Remind us, Lord, that you are with us. You are for us. Be on our hearts, Lord. Be on our minds and be on our lips. As we leave this worship service and we leave this place of worship and again go out into our communities, give us eyes that see, ears that hear, an open heart and an open mind, Lord. And help us to see the opportunities that we all have in front of us to choose you, to choose your faithful love and to trust you. We ask, Lord, that you would help us get it right, not just be right. We ask this, Lord, in your name. Amen.